Hello, good afternoon, PPMA colleagues. It's lovely to see so many of you starting to filter onto the call. My name is Natasha Brown, HR Director at London Borough of Waltham Forest, and I'm going to be your host this afternoon. So a big welcome to you all, and thank you for attending the change in how we retain talent webinar that is being delivered by PPMA in conjunction with our partners at Jobsgopublic. It is going to be hosted by Alison Scott from Halton Borough Council, and I'll now hand over for Alison to start.
I'm going to start, if that's okay, Natasha. I was just going to introduce myself as well from Jobsgopublic. So Alison and I have been working together for some time. We have run many campaigns for Halton Borough Council over the years, and we've talked a lot about retaining talent, working in different ways. And just to give you a bit of a snapshot before we get into the webinar, we've been working on campaigns within their social care team, adult social care, where it's an always-on aspect. It's involving paid advertising and actually reaching out to those candidates in different avenues. And where we've had some really good successes is because the client and the managers within those departments are really open to looking at skills and people's wanting to work for the council and wanting to work within social care, rather than looking at a list of NVQs and lots of qualifications that people need, and actually building people and boosting their profile and boosting their career within the organisation. So this is how this webinar came around. And obviously when the PPMA asked me to be involved, I went to Alison and said, please, what do you think people want to hear about? And let's talk about the good things that you're doing at Halton. So I'm from Jobsgopublic, and Alison Scott is here to introduce herself very quickly as well. So thank you very much.
Thanks, Amy. Yeah, so I'm Alison Scott, and I work within the organisational development team at Halton Borough Council. So we're a small local authority, but historically we've always punched above our weight in the area that we live in, working really well with colleagues within the city region. But obviously within that setup, you know, we're always competing for candidates for roles. And it's been really challenging, I think, not just for local authorities, but just in the jobs market in general, to recruit talent, not only to recruit, but then to retain that talent and to develop the skills of the people that we have within our organisation. So as Amy said, you know, we've had to start looking at different ways that we can do that. And just to start to focus less so on that, how many years experience in a similar role a candidate might have, or what qualifications they may have that are going to make them the ideal candidate for the role, and start to look a lot more at what skills, whether they're soft skills or a combination of aptitude, abilities that are going to make them an ideal candidate to train and to have stay with the organisation in the longer term. So that's what we've been trying to do for a while. As I say, like a lot of local authorities, there are a lot of challenges in recruitment. In the past, a real selling point for local authorities was the idea of a job for life, and that's not really what the vast majority of people are looking for now. It's often people are expecting to change careers a number of times in their lives, and it's about how we market ourselves, how do we sell what a local authority has to offer. So we've had to do that in a number of different ways. And as I say, this is something that we've been embarking upon for a while with the support of Amy and Jobsgopublic. But it's something that we're going to have to continue to develop and as we go along. So yeah, that's a little bit about me. So I've been with Halton for 17 years. So it's a great place to live. It's a great place to work. And it's about trying to sell all of the great benefits that there are in the broad, you know, it's a very diverse range of roles that we'd be recruiting to.
So just to carry on from that, Alison, tell me about the approach you've taken at Halton and what you're doing now to combat those issues.
I think in terms of the approach we've taken, we've started to look a lot more closely at our job descriptions and our person specifications for roles, to make sure that we are focusing upon what types of behaviours we're looking for from our candidates, as much as about their skills and experience to date. It's how we advertise those roles, because we really are having to be a lot more direct about what organisational values we have, what we offer to those candidates that are going to come in and work with us. So thinking about what we can do to develop their skills and abilities further, what are their aspirations, and how can we as an organisation support them on their journey with us from joining Holton. So a lot of work's gone into the way that we advertise, and particularly of late with our higher level recruitment. We've done a lot of work to try to really sell what it is that we're offering. Within Holton at the moment, we're going through a significant transformation process. And so there's an awful lot of change that's happening. And so really, in terms of the types of skills that we're looking for from our candidates, we really do need those people that have that growth mindset, that are adaptable and flexible, you know, that are open to change. So we're looking to identify some of those skills as part of our recruitment activities. And we've started to use psychometrics in a lot more depth over the last 3 or 4 years, I would say, but it's really ramped up now in the way that we're approaching those, and it's very personalised and tailored to the job role.
So how do you build the process of assessment? Where does the process start?
Yeah, well, as early as possible, ideally. Sometimes isn't always possible because these things can be thrust upon us. But as early as possible, it's getting access to that recruiting manager and to the service, and having a really frank and honest conversation about what their requirements are for the candidate that they want to fill the post. It's not, and we can't continue to simply recruit to what we've had before. So it's about having to challenge when we get those that feedback from a manager about, well, we need someone who's exactly like you know, Joe Bloggs that's moving on to another role, and thinking, well, what does the role require? Let's have a look at your job description. Let's have a look at the person specification, and let's have a look and compare that to some behavioural qualities using our psychometric tools. So it's starting to unpick what they think they want and what they actually need. So that's where we try to begin. And in doing that, we'll create an ideal, and I say ideal, job profile, because as we know, there isn't an ideal person exactly for any role behaviourally, but it starts to make the manager and the recruiting team that are going to be involved in this appointment think about what it is that they need that candidate to behave like. So if they're going to be moving into a role where they're going to need to be quite direct and forceful and assertive with people, and the candidates they have applying are more mild-mannered, hesitant and accommodating, well, already there's a slight clash there in terms of what behaviourally the role is requiring, particularly if they're having to discipline, you know, as a large part of that role. So it's being clear about what's being asked, because otherwise you're potentially setting up a candidate to fail if they were appointed. So we don't use it as a means of saying that, okay, we're looking for this is our ideal, and if you don't fit that, then you don't progress any further in the process. It's about looking then at creating appropriate questions as part of the interview process to really probe into those specific areas where there might be a slight difference in terms of what we're saying we're looking for, and the approach the candidate takes in order to get those outcomes. So it might well be that we're looking for somebody that is that dominant driving force, that's able to be direct and assertive. And what we get is somebody who's, you know, highly communicative, friendly, influential, persuasive, and they'll try to bring people with them using those skills rather than it being a direct tell. So it's not about ruling people out, but it's about being clear about what you're getting from each of those candidates in order to make a more informed decision. So in terms of the process, that's how we would tend to start it, is have those early conversations with managers, create an ideal profile for them, give them time to think about what that is, help support them with some interview questions they could be put into candidates. And then from that point on, once the shortlisting had taken place, we'd be contacting those people and sending them links to complete the relevant psychometric assessments. So there are a few different tools that we use. I'm not sure if you'd like me to tell you a little bit about
definitely. Well, what I was going to ask is it do you find that from your managers that it opens their eyes to have a different thought process? And like you said before, the people do tend to want somebody who has been in that job before. They're looking for a carbon copy, and that person doesn't always exist. So do you think from the manager's perspective, it's opening their eyes to actually have a better thought process and making sort of not testing them in a way, but just giving them more ideas of what to look for, and when you're looking about those soft skills?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's quite liberating in a way, because you are able to kind of say, well, look, we're trying to transform the way that the organisation works. We're all under increasing pressures to do more with less. And if we continue to do as we've always done, then we're always going to get the same results. So it's being able to have and build those relationships over time with managers, to really get to the heart of those matters and say, you want to drive your service forward by appointing this person, how are they going to do that, rather than how are they going to maintain the status quo? So yeah, that's really valuable to do, and it just gets them to think about the person as a whole, rather than it purely being a transactional come into work, do the tasks, go home. It's about being able to work with the way that the manager prefers to operate, the values and the culture of that team, that service area, what's going to be a good fit, what's going to work well, because it's not just about plugging a gap, it's about developing the whole team by that one appointment, so making sure that you build a stronger team as a result of it.
Yeah, perfect. Yeah, please go into more detail, Alison. Apologies for the doorbell there. I've had lots of different deliveries, so I'm just going to quickly disappear, but I'm going to let Alison describe those, and I'll be back in 2 seconds.
No problem. The joys of home working. So yes, the tools that we tend to use, we have a broad range, really. We have behavioural profile analysis, which is looking at behaviours in the workplace. So it will focus very much on how an ideal candidate prefers to work, you know, in their perfect situation. Do they like to be that driving, forceful individual, or do they like to be more mild-mannered, accommodating? Are they a people person, or are they very much focused on the reality, the facts of the situation, more probing and serious? Do they like to work at pace? Do they like to juggle different tasks and have variety? Or do they like to work in a more structured, methodical manner? How compliant are they? Do they like to follow rules, protocol, procedures, have a structured environment, be quite the perfectionist and accurate? Or do they like the autonomy to make decisions? Are they quite independent, firm, stubborn? Those kind of things that you can start to look into with this behavioural profile. And then as a result of that, it can tell us if they're moderating their behaviours in any way in the role that they're currently operating in. So do they feel that they're a good behavioural fit for their existing role? Or are they having to change things? And if so, how effectively do they feel that they're able to do that? And then lastly, it's able to show us when they're under extreme pressure and whether or not that results in any potential changes in their behaviour. So your naturally chatty, friendly, affable person, when the pressure's on, becomes very withdrawn and quiet, and you're aware that, you know, they're finding things tough. It's those kind of things. Do they struggle then to make decisions when they're under pressure? Really useful insights that we can use depending upon the, you know, the requirements of a specific job role. So that's our behavioural profile. And then we also have something called a trait emotional intelligence assessment that we use, which explores a variety of different facets of emotional intelligence from an individual's perspective. And that looks at aspects such as well-being, how happy they are with things in the present time, how optimistic they are about the future, their levels of self-esteem. It looks at their ability to control unnatural, unhealthy impulses, you know, to knee-jerk decisions into particular options, or do they, you know, sit back and look at things before they dive in? It looks at their stress management techniques and how satisfactory they think they are at managing their stresses, their ability to build relationships with other people, emotion regulation, to perceiving those emotions in other people and being able to control and manage those in other people. A whole broad range of different areas. It looks at how adaptable people perceive they are to change, how self-motivated they might be. You know, for a range of us, on occasion, it can be that we're quite self-motivated internally. We know we're driven to do a good job, but sometimes there's certain parts of the role that, you know, are pretty mundane and humdrum, and we need to motivate ourselves externally in some respects. We need the carrot dangling in order to see things through. So it gives us a lot of additional information. And you can imagine how in certain roles, it's going to be quite valuable. You're looking for somebody who's working, I always use the example in a HR role, if they're working within an employee relations team with exceptionally high off the scale empathy, that can be quite a challenge to have a significantly high score, because things are very procedural and you're following rules. So it can have a negative impact on that person if they feel that they have a lot of empathy and understanding for a person's circumstances. Flip that around, if you know you've got somebody who's working in adult social care, if they're working with individuals, then having a high level of empathy is going to be incredibly valuable. So it's not necessarily about having high scores across the board being a positive thing. Low scores can also be valuable. It's all context dependent. So again, this comes into the conversations that I've been having with that manager before the assessments are sent out, to say which of these traits, which of these facets of emotional intelligence are going to be particularly valuable in the role. Do you want someone who can walk into a room where they don't know anybody and network effectively, know how to feel socially confident? Do you need an assertive individual? What kind of things are you looking for that are going to help that person to achieve the objectives in the role? So that's the trait emotional intelligence tool that we use. And then lastly, we have an aptitude assessment called a general intelligence assessment, and that looks at somebody's fluid intelligence. So we use this to assess if we need somebody to come into a role and hit the ground running, then we're looking for somebody who's going to be having higher scores across the board within this assessment tool. Now it looks at aspects such as the ability to reason, to spot errors, to work confidently with numbers, and it's assessing the accuracy of an individual as well as the speed. So it strikes that balance to know how quickly people can learn new tasks and run with them. And often use the analogy of you know, everybody coming up shortly. It's next weekend, isn't it? The London Marathon. You know, there'll be lots of people that are at the start line, and you'll have the elite athletes that will get there, you know, a lot quicker than the guy who's dressed as Big Ben, but they'll all complete it. So with the general intelligence assessment, it's not to say that people can't complete the task, it's just how quickly they can pick up new information and run with it. And in certain roles within the organisation, that's really crucial. So in that instance, then that's the tool that we will go to. And often we'll use a combination. We may use all three. We may just use the behavioural profile, or a combination of all, but it's in conversation about what it is we're trying to find out. What's the purpose behind using that tool, rather than just using them all for the sake of it, because they're not always going to be necessary or important to the outcome for the treatment.
And is there a certain amount of weighting put on those when you're assessing figures? Actually,
no. The way that we've used them in Halton, we're not scoring somebody. It's part of the process, and it helps to build up a picture of that individual. So it's more holistic. We're not going to exclude somebody directly, because quite often they'll be invited to an interview. They may have to deliver a presentation. There might be some other form of assessment, written report. So it's used in combination, but it just adds an extra dimension. And quite often, as I say, we use them at a more senior level of recruitment, and then we will provide information to that appointment panel, who would then decide from all of that information who they would take through. But we'd be able to guide them with some potential questions then that would be more targeted for the individuals as a result, because we'd know by that point, yes, they're very strong in a written report, they've delivered a great presentation, but what we noticed from observing their behaviour within, say, a fishbowl exercise, is that they weren't overly assertive when other people started talking. They stopped and sat back. And this is also coming through within the profile, so it's reinforced by what we're witnessing. So it's not just used in isolation. I think a lot of the time when we've used these tools, there's a fear that people can have about, oh, it's going to tell me that I'm you know, there's something not quite right with me here, or, you know, there's a little bit of nervousness about just the term psychometric tools, isn't there, if you ever get asked to use them. But it's really important that we try very much to put candidates' minds at ease, that it's not something that we're doing to sift a candidate. It's very much about finding out what makes them tick, how would they like to be managed, because it provides information about that, and what's their, you know, their manager, are they able to meet their requirements, because it's so important to make sure that we get that fit and it works.
Yeah, I know we've talked a lot over the last couple of weeks, Alison, that the process doesn't stop when they're hired. It's an ongoing process.
Yeah,
18 months.
Yes, sorry. Yeah, it's not just about using it for recruitment. I think if you only use psychometrics there, then you're missing a huge aspect of the value. It's about making sure then that you're giving feedback to the candidate after the process, and that's whether they've actually been appointed or not, because what we want to do is make sure that for those candidates that have applied and perhaps weren't successful in that role, well, they could be fantastic in Halton. If something else comes up, we don't want to turn them away. So we want to provide them with some valuable feedback on what the tools are telling us, areas for potential development, based not just on what we've seen from the reports, but what we've witnessed that corroborates that from the various assessments they might have undertaken through the you know, assessment centres, etc. So that's what we really try to do, is give really valuable constructive feedback on strengths and development areas for all candidates, whether they go through or not. But for those that are successful, we provide the offer of coaching for them. So once they're in position and they've had a chance to settle in and find out a little bit about the role and, you know, get started on things, we'll provide feedback via usually an hour or so coaching session, where we'll use the tools as a starting point for a conversation, looking at the emotional intelligence wheel that comes through and all of the different facets, and saying, well, how do you feel that this reflects the way that you're behaving in the role currently? Is there anything you're finding a challenge? What training or development could be undertaken that would support you? Job shadowing, mentoring, all of those kind of offers then can be put forward to a candidate to make sure that we've got a very tailored development plan for them, with the opportunity to come back, say 18 months, 2 years time, and recomplete the assessments to see that movement, because they are a snapshot in time. And if you're making a concerted effort to focus on some aspects, then you can obviously change the way that you respond. And so it's looking to see if those efforts have actually had an impact by looking at what scores and things are coming back on the tools, you know, 18 months to 2 years down the line. And the feedback that we've had from those who've been appointed to roles using the psychometrics has been overwhelmingly positive. I think I spoke to somebody a couple of weeks back now who had gone into a senior role, and they said that it made them feel as though the organisation had taken a real genuine interest in them as a person. And that's fantastic to hear, because that's what we're looking to do.
It's really important that you actually have that feedback. Apologies for feedback on here. But it's good to have that feedback from candidates, because what might be the right job for them now could be, like you say, another job within Halton, another job for another local authority around about, and people do move around, they do talk, and if you're giving them really good feedback and providing that, it puts your onus of you being a really good organisation and having the skills and the good people that are going to be working for you. My last question to you, Alison, before we can take questions if anybody wants to have any questions, but I mean, how has it been perceived by your elected members, by your managers, by the senior management team at the council, and how have you been able to measure success?
Yes, that's a good question. I think initially there was a little bit of skepticism about the value that psychometrics could bring. I think particularly with elected members and some of the organisation who had probably been more traditional in the way that they'd approached recruitment. And I think what's happened is that over time it's kind of proved itself to a large extent. To some, it feels a little bit like you're being given a horoscope. And actually, when we've had candidates that have come through particularly if we've had internal candidates as part of a mix, it's reassured those recruiting and managers and elected members that they are fairly accurate in terms of the results that are coming through. So that's been really positive. It's something that's grown over time, and I think it was said recently, as I say, results have spoken for themselves. We had an appointment committee where they said that it really helped them to understand each candidate as a person and what makes them tick. And that's invaluable really when you're trying to appoint somebody, because you're not just wanting to know they can come in and do the job, it's how they're going to engage with other people and how are you going to get the best out of them. And I think the psychometrics really allow that to happen. In terms of measuring the success, I think our retention is a real strong measure of that. And I think for those appointments that we've had so far using the tools, we haven't had anybody who's gone yet, which obviously, yeah, I mean, it's you know, for some of those appointments, it may well be that it's less than 12 months, but for an awful lot, they've been here 5-6 years now, when we first started to use them in this targeted way. And they're still here. There's still lots of opportunities for them to develop, and that we will return review the results of the psychometrics, and they can come back and ask for them to be repeated if that's something that's going to be valuable. The offer of coaching or mentoring, or the options to shadow in other areas. So it's not just about the tools themselves, it's about making sure that your onboarding is, you know, up to the mark, that it's doing everything it needs to do, and that there is a personalised, bespoke development plan for each individual that ensures that you're showing that you value them in your organisation and they've got something powerful to offer. So quantitatively, I suppose, it is your retention rates, say they're very high, but then it's just that level of self-awareness that it brings to candidates as well. You know, they're more aware of where their strengths are, areas that they may feel need to be developed, helps to value the diversity of a team, I think just better understanding behaviours, and it creates a more empowering culture where people are just more aware of what they can contribute. So a lot of qualitative benefits, I think, and measures of success for us as an organisation here in Halton, and it's definitely something that I see going from strength to strength moving forward, and we'll start to use it even more and to get the same, hopefully, positive results.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Alison. I'm conscious of the time because we're a couple of minutes away from 12:30. I don't know if you want to take over, Natasha, and do what you do fabulously.
Thank you, Alison. Thank you very much. That was really interesting to hear the journey at Halton. I mean, for me in particular, hearing how you're using the psychometric testing after the interview stage, I think is really, really, really crucial. I think some of the struggles that you're, referring to, a lot of people on the call feel that's familiar. I am conscious of the time. Has anybody got any immediate questions for Alison or Amy? None yet?
Silence is golden.
Absolutely. And we don't always have a question immediately after we've heard a presentation like this. Alison, I'm sure you'd be open to people making contact with you if they want to find out more information about the stuff that you're doing and continuing to do brilliantly for Halton.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, absolutely no problem at all.
Well, I think with that, I'll thank everybody for their time. I hope you found it useful, and have a good afternoon, PPMA colleagues.